Hello, my movie-loving dudes! I'm KillJoy Jake, and today we're going to be doing a review of Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Before we get into this, if you can like this video and subscribe, I will give you $1, and results may vary on that. You may or may not get the dollar, but you'll never know if you don't subscribe. Alright, now let's get into it.
Well, sometimes that is better.
Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was written and directed by James Gunn. Gunn has also made the other two Guardians movies, as well as horror favorites such as Slither and the script for Dawn of the Dead 2004. This movie serves as the swan song for our beloved Guardians, as well as James himself, who's taking on the DCEU. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 may be my favorite in the entire Guardians of the Galaxy franchise. Some spoiler-free takeaways include that there's not too many references to the other MCU movies. Not too many. Definitely the least that we've gotten in any MCU Phase 4 or Phase 5 project, without a doubt. And my god, that is refreshing. Guardians 3 does suffer at times from some of my other problems with the MCU right now, if it's a joke undercutting very emotional scenes, if it's like entire sequences of like just joke after joke after joke that doesn't land. But it's nowhere near as glaring as some of the other projects we've seen in Phase 4 and Phase 5, which once again is just very refreshing and just feels like we're going back to like the early days of Marvel with this movie. Maybe my expectations are just so low for the MCU that anything remotely compelling is just going to impress me, but I loved Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Like, I thought this was an absolute blast, maybe one of my favorite Marvel movies of all time. It's a compelling story about facing your demons. I actually had thoughts in my brain during this movie, and I can't say that about Thor: Love and Thunder. Did I just say that out loud? And listen, I used to love the MCU. I think phases 1 through 3 are immaculate. I had so much fun with that. I was a shill for that company. I saw every movie, I bought Funko Pops, and I cried when Iron Man died. I'm not afraid to admit it. But the big thing about Phase 4 and Phase 5 to me is it just doesn't feel necessary. I know, really a hot take, right? It just feels like the story concluded back with Endgame, and this is all just like more stuff so Marvel can make money. There has been some standouts, of course, like I think Shang-Chi and Multiverse of Madness were fun, but they just didn't compare to some of the other bigger hits from like phases 1 through 3. But with all of those criticisms I have for Marvel at the moment, I'm still rooting for them. I want them to make good movies. Like I said, I used to love Marvel. I used to love what they were doing, building up this gigantic cinematic universe. But I just think the approach to Phase 4 isn't necessary. I almost wish they had started a brand new story with a brand new set of characters and actors. But I am rooting for Marvel, and if this same level of quality can stay consistent, we can set a new precedent with what Guardians of the Galaxy 3 did here. That would be fantastic. But at the same time, I think that's my heart talking, and my brain is telling me that the reason this movie is so good is because James Gunn is an absolute animal behind the camera. The direction in this film is really impeccable. That's also due to the writing, which is like, once again, just a bunch of little storylines weaving in and out of each other. But also, with so many characters, sometimes you can get lost in that, and you'll have like a super underdeveloped character because, you know, you have 6 other characters you have to focus on big time. Everybody has a pretty damn decent arc in this, and I thought that was impressive. There's 3 big standout characters though, in my opinion. Drax, who's like typically just kind of your comedic relief character with like a few good character moments. Drax actually has a wonderful arc to kind of like finish his character, essentially. Not getting into any spoilers yet, but it kind of covers up this big like plot device that they used that I thought was kind of dumb. But then when you see why that was done, it was all done on purpose. Like, they did that for a reason. I'm like, okay, I actually really liked that. The main villain in this is the High Evolutionary, who is played by this actor right here. I'm not gonna try and pronounce that name because I'm just gonna butcher it. But this guy is phenomenal. Like, maybe one of the best MCU villains ever. I think that his performance in this is so electric, and he's given it all to this performance. It's amazing. He's your stereotypical god complex villain, but at the same time, he has some really interesting features to him. Like, he's basically Seth Brundle mixed with RoboCop, which is such an interesting and great sci-fi choice to make for a villain in the Guardians of the Galaxy. And of course, Rocket Raccoon. I don't think I've ever cried more about a CGI animal in my entire life. Guardians 3 is a massive outlier in the later phases of the MCU here, which is refreshing, surprisingly dark, and empathetic. All right, we're getting into spoiler territory, so if you have not seen Guardians of the Galaxy 3, go on and check it out and then come right on back. Don't get this one spoiled for you, toots. Who says toots anymore? What kind of jerk says that? Like I was saying earlier, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 may be a top 5 MCU film for me. I just thought this was a super effective and fun throwback. It felt like coming out of Iron Man for the first time all the way back in 2008, all over again. But with that, it stands out from some of the other MCU movies for being so dark and so compelling with its main storyline. There's not too many references to some of the other MCU movies. Like, I think they reference like Thanos at one point, but it's like, it's nothing that has to really do with the plot all that much, thank God. The after the credits scene, which is like all the way after the credits, there's 2, of course, because it's Marvel. That kind of sets up more Guardians of the Galaxy in this universe, but if I had to guess like where that's going, it's just going to be the Avengers movie that comes out in 2025. We'll probably see Star-Lord there, maybe the rest of the Guardians, but who knows? All we know is that Chris Pratt's character is back on Earth, so that's pretty cool. I almost wish Star-Lord had died. Is that kind of messed up? Maybe a little bit, but I kind of wish he would have died. I think that would have been really emotional. Speaking of emotional though, Rocket's backstory, which like I said, I don't think I've cried more in my entire life over a CGI animal. I didn't think ever in my life I would cry so many tears in front of 100 strangers over an otter with robot arms, or a seal with tires for legs. I never thought I would cry that much over these little fellas, but man, they sure were some cute little fellas. But wow, I was blown away by Rocket's backstory. Like I said, it's very David Cronenberg inspired, very The Fly in a lot of ways, and I love that. I kind of want a whole movie of just a bunch of little creatures like that coming together to escape from like some crazy mad scientist. I would watch a whole movie of just that. Like, that was phenomenal. Speaking of CGI animals, the effects in this actually look fantastic. Something I haven't been able to say about Marvel for a very long time. All the CGI across the board was really well done, and I don't know, I don't know what changed, but something changed from Phase 4 and Phase 5 to this movie. This was old school Marvel at its very best. And I mentioned earlier about how there's multiple plot lines that weave in and out of each other really well. Going back to some of the other movies just from Phase 4 that I actually went to the theater to see, unfortunately, I feel like there was a lot of things going on in those movies that just didn't really amount to that much. Like the bad guy in Thor: Love and Thunder, I just think is so underdeveloped. He's supposed to be the God Butcher, you know, he should earn that title in this film, and he kind of kills some gods at the beginning, I guess, but then he kind of just wimps out the rest of the movie. I don't feel that way about any of the characters in this movie. I've always felt like the MCU used too many characters in one movie, but this one does it really well. Like, you have the Adam Warlock story, which is arguably the least important thing, but it's done really well because you have Will Poulter in the role, who's a very fantastic and very underrated actor. After doing a little bit of research, which I had no idea about this, but Adam Warlock is apparently a good guy in the comics, and he kind of starts off as a villain in this movie, but slowly turns into basically one of the Guardians, which I think is cool. I'd actually love to see him in more movies. I thought he stood out, especially towards the end of this film when he gets saved by Groot and then goes and saves Chris Pratt's character. I just call him Chris Pratt. He's just a little rat fella. Look at him. I think there's just the right amount of everything in these storylines. Like, Rocket's backstory kind of goes through like the first 2 acts, and then it concludes when Rocket gets back up and he's saved for the 3rd act. I thought that was really well done. It feels a little disjointed at points, but I think it works overall, and I don't know, I love the way you have all these different storylines weaving in and out of each other. And it continues stuff from Guardians 2 that I almost forgot about, like with all the gold people, like that comes back, Adam Warlock and all that. I don't know, I thought that was really impressive. I'm gonna keep saying I don't know, I thought that was impressive this whole video, because I really did not expect this movie to be that good. I went into this film expecting a 4 out of 10, and this is maybe like an 8, 9 out of 10. Now, I do have a few tiny criticisms about Guardians 3 as well. There's some little tiny just weird things about this movie I don't really understand why it was a choice, why it was made. The aspect ratio changes every 3 minutes for no apparent reason. I don't know why, but at some points it's letterboxed, at some points it's not. It just keeps flipping back and forth. I don't know why. I couldn't tell you. The Guardians of the Galaxy celebrate after an entire planet the size of Earth gets destroyed with what, maybe like 7 billion people on it, but then, you know, they save a couple of kids. It's maybe a little out of place to be celebrating when you saved maybe like 200 kids, but you let probably like what, billions of them die on that planet. You know what? It's fine. Don't worry worry about it. That was a very weird misstep, I think, in this movie, but besides that, I don't have too many other glaring issues with it. Chris Pratt's humor, where he's talking about how, oh, I miss Gamora and all that, is a bit much to me too, but once again, just little things here and there. I say little things here and there about genocide of an entire planet. I have to stop. But getting into some nitty-gritty details about the film that I absolutely loved was the Cronenberg set pieces. Oh, not only is Rocket's backstory very David Cronenberg inspired, but so are some of the set pieces. You get to see the High Evolutionary's like lab with all of his different creations live in there, and it's like made out of flesh and hair that they have to like cut through at one point. Ugh. This movie is surprisingly really disgusting and dark, and I just loved it. Like I said, it's very Cronenberg inspired, and I just think that's so interesting to me. Unlike some of the mostly gray and desaturated MCU films we've gotten in the past, the use of color in this film is gorgeous. Like, we have this sequence, like I was just talking about, where all of our characters have these different colored like spacesuits, and they're like going and cutting holes in flesh, building things in space. I don't know. This is just a really gorgeous shot. I know it's filmed in front of a green screen. They didn't really film it in space, but maybe they did that. There's a lot of brutality and gore in this movie that I found really surprising as well. Once again, just for an MCU movie, there's a lot of things that shocked me. Star-Lord uses the F word at one point too, and my God, was the family next to me not happy about that. The gore and the swearing felt very punk rock to me in this movie because the MCU doesn't usually do that. Sometimes they'll throw an ass in there every now and then, but it's like, who cares? This movie's got some edge to it, while some of the other films in this franchise do not. You gotta crack a few eggs to make an omelet, a great man once said. And to do that, sometimes you gotta offend some people. The MCU likes to be very safe with its humor and all that. It's like, oh, we gotta make jokes that everyone's gonna like, but if you're gonna do something that stands out, someone's gonna get offended by it. That's just the way art works. Finally, I want to talk about 3 characters that stood out big time to me in this movie. Drax was one that I was talking about earlier. He kind of goes on this weird arc throughout this movie that, once again, I didn't love at first, but where it ends up going, I thought was actually really masterful. Drax is his same old self. He does some really dumb things that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, just like in all the other Guardians movies, but then they use it to their advantage, and they actually like comment on that, which I thought was interesting. He clotheslines some guy on a motorcycle just for no apparent reason, and then gets on the motorcycle with Mantis and leaves the ship, which results in just basically the whole plan falling through. Things like this have happened in the other Guardians movies, and it just makes me scratch my head as to why they still have Drax on the team. And literally in the next scene, they address that. They address that Drax is kind of dumb, but that he makes people laugh. He's a nice guy overall, and Mantis defends him. I love Dave Bautista too. Like, I think there's a lot of wrestlers turned actors that are like, okay, you know, they're pretty good. Like John Cena, I think, is actually a phenomenal actor, which is crazy to say. 5 years ago, I never would have said that. But Dave Bautista is absolutely my favorite wrestler turned actor, and I think he kills it for the most part in this role, but it's just the writing with Drax. They just make him seem really dumb to the point where I just question why he's part of the team. And we address that here to the point where it actually goes somewhere with the plot. Drax may not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but he's really good with kids, and he's the reason that they're able to save everybody on board the ship. They talk about later how he wasn't born to be a destroyer, he was born to be a dad, and I just thought that was very wholesome and sweet. The High Evolutionary, I think, is one of the best Marvel villains we've ever gotten. I really think this guy's performance is like a 10 out of 10. He kills it here. He sells himself to this role really well. The guy has a few lines that he drops on you where it just makes you feel the evil that emanates from him. Kind of reminded me of why I like Khan so much in Wrath of Khan. Khan is this super evil bad guy at first, you know, but then like as you get to know him throughout all of Wrath of Khan, he starts saying this like super poetic dialogue, and it's like really philosophical and interesting, but you almost kind of feel for the guy in a weird way. And I kind of feel that way about the High Evolutionary in this film. I don't think he's as good as Ricardo Montalban in that movie, but he's fantastic here still. The jealousy that you see come from the High Evolutionary because Rocket is the one to ultimately fix his machine and make it perfect, that is, that's so compelling. That's so interesting to me. I absolutely love that element to this movie. He has a very different reason for why he's doing what he's doing, opposed to like every other bad guy we've gotten that sometimes feel like Thanos clones or something very close to what Thanos was essentially doing, because, you know, that's their biggest thing ever. You can separate the High Evolutionary and Thanos. Like, they have very different goals, and that's, once again, just very refreshing. I know a lot of this, what I'm saying, sounds very stupid because it's like, well, yeah, of course that's a good thing, but Marvel hasn't done these things in a long time, so a lot of this just feels so good. It's like, finally, we're back to good storytelling here. All right, I'm getting off my soapbox. I love the MCU now. I don't care. It's fantastic. Y'all can fight me. I give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 an 8 out of 10. This was a big step up for Marvel, and I really hope that this sets a new precedent for what the quality of these films should be. Let's keep our fingers crossed that the Marvels coming out later this year is good, but that's what my heart is telling me once again. My mind is telling me that no, it's not going to be good. But you know what? I'm going to listen to my heart right now, and maybe it's good. Maybe it's going to be fantastic. I hope it is. Fingers crossed, baby. What did you think about Guardians of the Galaxy 3, though? Leave me something about it in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching my GullGotha 3 review, as some call it. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more movie and horror movie content in the future. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you want to see this channel grow, and as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.